Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Mixed Media Monday. I hope everybody's doing good. Welcome back to my channel if you're returning, and if you're new, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we're just going to mess around in my art journal, and you can see how I started a page and took it from a plain white sheet to way too much color and had to figure out how to salvage it. I work mainly when I'm just playing with techniques, colors, layouts, whatever, in a composition notebook, one of the cheap 50-cent ones that you can get around back to school time. They're usually no more than $1. My favorite ones actually come from the 99-cent store, and they're like $1, I think. 99 cents. So they're really good because they take away that intimidation of starting a blank page in an expensive notebook. Or I do use nicer notebooks or sketchbooks or mixed media books, but for this, I really like not having that fear of ruining something because it's literally $1 notebook. And when they're nice and full, they look so cool, like you've accomplished so much. So anyways, I'm just laying down some really old brittle vintage dictionary page on a white gessoed background. And I'm using Liquitex Matte Medium. This is my go-to in my art journal because it doesn't make the pages sticky. Even if I use matte Mod Podge, it makes the pages super sticky. And if I leave it closed for too long with Mod Podge on it, it will always, it'll typically tear wherever the page is stuck together, and I don't want that. Because I do, on occasion, scan the pages in my art journal if I really like them or can't recreate it, and turn it into a digital element so that I can either print it or do something else with it. So now I'm just laying down some Dina Wakley tissue. I think it's Dina Wakley. Yeah. I love her art, and her tissue papers are really nice, but they are hard to tear. Normally with tissue paper, you can just get a wet paintbrush and tear it along the line, but with this one, it's a little bit harder to do, and I don't like cutting it because it makes too harsh of a line so that when you paint over it, you can see the line. So when you tear it, it frays the edges a little bit and just makes it easier to blend. So now I'm just going in with some fluid acrylic, which is not very fluid. I think it's Artist Loft. It was inexpensive, and I thought I'd try it, and I have to add a ton of water to actually make it move. And I'm just randomly putting down marks on my page. No rhyme or reason. And then I'm going to use some of this olive green that I have. It's not fluid, it's just regular acrylic paint, but I added water to it just to get it a little bit more transparent and movable. I don't like, in my art journal, I don't typically work with thicker paints just because they take forever to dry and I'm impatient. I obviously am using a heat tool to speed up the drying process just so I don't have to wait to work. I'm impatient, like I said, and I don't like to wait to add the next layer, and I didn't want to create mud. As you'll see in a minute, I ended up creating a completely messy, overcrowded, overcolored page that I figured out towards the end how to salvage. Very rarely do I leave a page in my book and just move on. And about halfway through this one, I was ready to move on. So now I'm just dropping some Daler Rowney fluid acrylic, and it was way greener than I thought it was going to be. I knew it was going to be dark, but I didn't think it was going to be such a vibrant green. And it doesn't really go, in my opinion. It's okay, but I had already started, so I just committed and tried to evenly disperse the color. And then my camera stopped recording at some point, and you miss where I put on this pink, which I think is Dina Wakley paint? It's gotta be. I'm pretty sure it's Dina Wakley paint. And you can see this page is just starting to get way too busy. Way, way, way too busy. I had no plan for where it was going, but I had a plan, if that makes sense. And where it ended up is absolutely not where I thought it was going to go. So, one of my go tos is to just add stamping to the background, and it usually helps break up the pattern a little bit if you use black or white. And here, obviously, I'm using black. And I realized after a couple times I wasn't really feeling it. It was just, it felt to me like it was getting busier and busier. I literally got to a point where I should have just stopped and walked away from this, but I was determined to keep it going. I was determined to figure out how to salvage this. And you would think that at this point, when I realized how busy it is, that I would stop and, you know, do something. So I kind of did. I tried to push the background back a little bit by adding some white gesso, but all that did was make it look busier and messier, and I was not feeling it. I hated it. So after drying it, I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this page? So where did my mind go? It literally went to, oh, I know, let's grab my Uniball pen and do some asemic writing on it and make it even messier. Yeah, I don't really know why. I don't know. I thought, yeah, maybe this will help if I add more black, but it's so fine that you can't tell what it is other than it being just messy. And no, I'm not writing any actual words. I'm just scribbling basically. So I did that and I looked at it again and I still didn't like it. So at this point, I was like, all right, how am I gonna recover this page? Because originally it was gonna be in a landscape orientation. I don't work that often in my book, but the last few layouts I've done were that. So I was like, oh, why not? Let's do that again. Well, it ends up being in a portrait layout when I'm done. So I don't know what the technique is called, and I'm sure there's a name for it, but it's where you take white paint. You can do it in black too. I mean, you can do it in any color you want, but you kind of doodle a design so that it's gonna only be, so like I did leaves. So I took some white fluid acrylic paint and I started drawing like a vine or like a branch with leaves on it. Just free-handed it. I made a bunch of mistakes, which is fine because it's easy to cover up with this technique. If you guys know what this is called, please somebody leave it in the comments because I have no idea how to even Google it to figure out what it's called. But basically, I end up hiding most of the background, or at least in the center, I end up being able to hide a lot of the busyness that I threw up there on that page. The fluid acrylic I like because it's fluid and it's really easy to control with a fine-tipped brush. And it goes a long way. You really don't need that much. I've had a little tiny bottle of black golden fluid acrylic. I think it's golden. And I have had that thing for like a year and a half and it's not empty yet. And I use it all the time. And fluid acrylic is great to do splatters, which I probably did on this page too because that seems to be my go-to. So now you can see I watered down some gesso just to make it a little bit transparent. And I'm starting to paint white in between the leaf shapes so that all that's left, and you'll see at the very end where I put when I put the picture in, you'll see what I'm talking about. But all that you can really see in the leaf shape is the part that I'm not painting the white. And so I'm sure it's easier to see on a bigger screen, but my editing screen is really tiny. So to me, it doesn't look like you can see it very well. So I go through and I make sure I just kind of push all of that color back into the painting to mask the messiness. You'll still see it peek through even at the end because I am going to add another layer of white. You'll see it still peek through a little bit. It's not my favorite page even when I'm done. It's okay, but you know what? That's what my art journal is for. It's for practice. It's for ideas. It's to get things out, see what works, what doesn't work, and obviously this didn't work. And if you're wondering about painting on composition notebook pages, so they don't take by themselves water very well. They take paint just fine. So what I tend to do is paint a layer of gesso or use a book as my kind of excess paint book. So when I'm working on something, I always have a composition notebook open next to me so that I don't end up wasting paint. And then I just rub it on the pages, and then you end up with these really funky backgrounds. So again, I'm going over it with one more layer of that white because it wasn't quite hidden enough, I guess. I needed that color to be pushed back even more. So I did the same thing where I just did some white gesso and I added some water. And I did the white gesso because it's matte and it doesn't have a sheen at all. And when you add water, it's a very matte look. And I used the Liquitex Basics gesso. That's only because I can't find the other liquid. I think Liquitex goes in levels, and this is like the beginner Liquitex level, I think, because I used to buy a different one and I liked it a lot better. It was a little bit more fluid and it lasted a little bit longer. I seem to have to use more of this one to get coverage. And I gesso pretty much everything before I start painting on it, whether it's a canvas, a piece of paper, a piece of wood. Even the pre-gessoed canvases, they're never gessoed enough, so I always put another layer of gesso on top of it. So I think I was just kind of looking for, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. Oh, I wanted to go back and make the leaves stand out a little bit more. So over the top of the gesso, I used more fluid acrylic. And because this fluid acrylic is not matte and it's very pigmented, it made those leaves stand out even more, which now that I'm watching it and I'm seeing me going over the areas, I should have just stopped once I was done with this. Maybe added, I don't know, maybe a little something, but no, of course, I took it too far. And if you clicked on this video, you obviously saw the end result, so you know what I'm talking about. Because I try to make the thumbnails what the end result looks like, just so you can see the process. And if you're still here 13 minutes into it, thank you. I appreciate you. I know it's easy to click off videos, and I try not to do it, but I mean, I think we're all guilty of it. So if you've made it this far, appreciate it. So I cut this out. It says be epic. I cut it out for something else I was working on, and it was sitting next to me, and I was like, wonder if I can somehow incorporate that. So this is where I go making way too many marks again. So I'm taking that Uniball pen and I am outlining the shape of the leaves or the branch or whatever you want to call it in a very haphazardly way. I tend to do this a lot when something doesn't look finished. So I go over it once, and then the second pass with the pen, I go over it and I make kind of less intentional lines, and then I do little hash marks around the edges of it. I have no idea why I do that. I do that on a lot of art. It's funny because I always say that I don't have a style, but then when I look back at different things and I can see the processes that I duplicated, and I'm like, well, I guess I do have a style. So that pen, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it's great because it's waterproof. Once it's dry, you can add water or paint or whatever over it and it's not going to smear. So I really like that. So I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. So I took the actual cutouts and placed them on top just to kind of see what it was going to look like. And I actually kind of liked it. And if I was smart, I would have just glued those down and called it a day. But no, I had to be extra and try to paint it. So you'll see me trace over the letters with that same pen because I thought in my head maybe I'll like it if I just outline it and it's just kind of an outline, kind of like the leaves were. And again, you'd think I would have stopped there, but no, I didn't. I just kept going. So we're just gonna speed through this real quick so you don't have to keep watching. When I finally get to this point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to color these letters in. And the Sharpie wasn't giving me an opaque enough look. So I was like, oh, I'll use my big Liquid-Tex paint pen. These are my favorite, like graffiti type pens. So I'm like, okay, this could work. And then I realized after I started coloring the first letter in that the tip on that was way too big to control and make it clean. So I think I finished this letter. The tip on those pens is huge. I think it's like a 1-inch chisel. It's meant for graffiti. So I switched it up to use fluid acrylic and I cut all that out so you didn't have to watch me do it. And then I splattered some hot pink paint as I do. Again, liquid acrylic Daler Rowney. I've gone through like 3 bottles of that already. And I just splattered some paint on it and went through to dry it. And I think the only thing I haven't done on this page is seal it. Oh, I did some highlights. You know, I'm not an artist. I know I play one on TV, but I'm not. So highlights and like drop shadows and things like that are so confusing to me. Like I know the concept of wherever the light is going and the opposite of that is where the light's coming from is where the shadow is. And it never turns out right unless I'm looking at something to specifically tell me on each letter where I need to put the highlights. So whatever. Practice, not perfection, right? So that is it. That is the full art journal page. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned what not to do. Until next time, guys, I will see you in the next video. Bye.